Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us once again. A word alive. It is good to be present this Lord today. We're grateful once again to have Minister Tammy White with us. Bless you, sister. Always good to see you. Always good to have you with us. Amen. And we trust that all is going well with you, our viewers. We're praying for you and asking God to continue to strengthen you as you continue to face this pandemic that we are dealing with, and we trust that God is guarding you and keeping you. As always, we would advise you, or better yet, request of you that you hit the share button and the like button so that you have individuals that will join us in our Bible study. Hopefully, you've been reading along with us as we've been studying from 2 Samuel. And hopefully this morning you are prepared to at least take a look at 2 Samuel chapters 10, 11, and 12 this morning. Having gone over those various chapters, it appears to be an exciting time in the life of David and Israel. And we're praying that we will find some difficult points in the text that will help each of us to recognize that God is continuing to bless all of us. Amen. As a reminder, we do remind you that on Sunday mornings at 10:30, we have our worship experience, and we invite you to join us for our live streaming at the Second Baptist Worship Center of Coatesville. We are continuing to say thank you so much for your financial support, and pray that you'll continue to bless us as we attempt to minister to the needs of our community and our congregation. Thank you so much again for all of you who were participants as we had the Red Cross Drive. Amen. It was a great success, and the quota that we had set up, we exceeded that. Amen. And we are grateful that you were kind enough to bless our community. Amen. As we attempted to meet the needs of our both congregation and our community. So again, we thank you for your participation. This morning, we once again lift up in our presence those who are on the front line, those who continue to serve so many. And we're asking God to protect you, keep you, and bless you according to his perfect will. We remind individuals, please remain safe, and please recognize that it is essential that you wear your mask in public, that you make sure that you practice cleanliness, you use the hand sanitizers, and please make sure that you practice social distancing. For those of you who have questioned us in reference to our worship experience on Sundays, we do want you to know that when you see the choir members on Sunday morning, and it appears that they are in close proximity to each other, please know that they are staggered on the platform, and they are at least 6 feet away from each other, both from side to side and from front to back. So they are practicing social distancing, and at that time they're not wearing masks because, again, they are far enough apart so that they are safe. At the same time, anyone who comes in this building, place of worship, we first check their temperatures. You are required to wear a mask. Also, we have hand sanitizers on the wall, as well as those hand sanitizers that are there and presented to you by the nurses that are at the front of our institution. So please know that we're making sure that you are safe. Again, we thank you so much for your presence, your support, and pray that God will continue to bless you as you continue to go about your business. Let's pray this morning, shall we? Father, we thank you once again for this privilege of fellowshipping together. We thank you for allowing our viewing audience to be here among us and to bless us with their presence and bless them with our presence. And so that we ask that your spirit will continue to reveal to each of us those truths that you have us to know. be with us now. Bless us in every area of our lives, spiritually, physically, mentally, and financially. Because God, you know our needs. Continue to bless our leadership. Give them, oh God, please, enough sense to follow your lead and help them to recognize what's best for all. It's in the name of Christ Jesus, our Lord, we bring you thanks. Amen. Amen. Now, why don't we get started this morning and taking a look at the biblical text? We are in 2 Samuel, taking a look at chapter 10. And I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself in doing the research and taking a look at the commentaries in reference to the biblical text. I was so excited, Sister Tammy. It was just awesome to take a look at David and what he was going to experience, and then to also figure out what did this have to do with us today. Wow. Yeah. So let's look at chapter 10, shall we? The word says, after this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. The good thing is that we recognize that David had a good relationship with this individual early on. Yeah. Sometimes relationships can have a tendency to shift and change. On the one hand, early on, you might be extremely close to an individual, but sometimes things transpire that can somehow cause the relationship to become a bit different. The word says, so David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. But the prince of the Ammonites said to Hanun, their lord, do you think because David has sent comforters to you that he's honoring your father? And you got to know that within the audience, there's always the naysayers. There's always going to be an individual that wants to look at it negatively, when it could be a positive thing. And the word says, has not David sent his servants unto you to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? And so again, you recognize that here is an individual who is throwing into the pot something that might cause some trouble. In verse 4, the word says, so Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garment in the middle at their hips and sent them away. And please don't miss the fact that herein is a very derogatory statement. First off, it's an embarrassment when you are used to shaving and you want it to look a certain way. And these individuals have decided that they're only going to take off half the beard. If that's not bad enough, now it's decided that we're going to cut off their clothing, their garments, and cut it off up to the buttocks, to the hip area, so that there are parts of the anatomy that's showing that ought not be shown. Maybe when we take a look at this, we're reminded of the fact that when David danced before the individuals, the sister thought that he was dancing in such a way that certain parts of the body might be revealed. So this is like a slap in the face to these individuals. Verse 5 says, when it was told David that he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, remain in Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. Wow. Sister Tam, is there anything in the text so far that the author has touched on that you feel like we need to discuss just a little bit more? Or
no, actually, I thought that was good. How you put that point out about their beards being shaved halfway. I was waiting to hear to ask you, what did you think about that?
Yeah.
Beat me to it.
Okay. It's so amazing because, again, they wanted to inflict as much as embarrassment upon these individuals as possible. Sometimes our individuals in our personal lives, they may not shave off our beard, may not cut off our clothing up to our buttocks, but there's always a way that there are some individuals who want to reveal some area of your personal life that might be damaging to you. And so we have to be mindful that within this passage of scripture, there are demanding points that says take a very close look, because there are some things that happen that's essential for our personal lives. In verse 6, the word says, when the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rahab and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Makkah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tah, 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. And the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and Rahab and the men of Tah and Makkah were by themselves in the open country. And scenario is being presented. There are a great number of individuals, and there are some scenarios that's being presented that's causing problems for Israel and for David at this point. It's always amazing because David has been blessed by the Lord to recognize the improprieties that may be presented by individuals and finds a way around them. When we stay in close contacts with God, God can reveal to us situations that we may not even see before it happens, so that we are prepared for it when it does happen.
Amen. Amen.
In verse, what were you about to say?
I was going to say, didn't you think it was amazing how it had to be rumored in that time how great Israel was, how great a king David was, his army, because the Amorites, when they realized they were no longer in their good graces, they went out and hired.
That's right.
They went out and hired, men to fight with them in the army against them. And I was like, wow, it's amazing.
And so when you look at that thought, what kind of statement do you think that makes for us today?
I would say, oh, wow. So many different things, because we have a way of thinking we're right when we're actually wrong, and we'll go to any means necessary to quote unquote defend ourselves after we began the trouble, after we started it, and I think it opens up so many avenues, because a lot of times we tend to, how should I say, put ourselves in a position that God didn't intend for us to be. We do it to ourselves. Had these men took the favor that David was actually bestowing upon them, instead of making a mockery out of the men, his army, it's you can read so much into this. And if you bring it forth to the present time, we're really making a mockery.
And as you said, it's so amazing because so often individuals will align themselves with people that at one time they never would have aligned themselves with. It says to us in the 21st century that there are times when we will personally align ourselves with people that were once our enemies. And so often we may not be willing to pay the price that was paid here, but to malign someone else's character, we can manipulate individuals by bribing them.
And don't you think that's a lot of that's going on today? If you really think about it in the world, if you have any understanding of what's going on in the world today, people we have, I'll just keep it broad, people that we have never come across, would never have crossed our paths, because we always thought that we were economically better. We don't deal with poor people. We don't deal with people that don't have the same stature and the same reputation we had. But now we're going to use those same people to get us what we want, and we're going to speak the language they want to hear.
Merely because they came from the other side of the track. Because they didn't matriculate at a certain institution that we may have matriculated at. And so then we began to look down on the individual. Now we find individuals aligning themselves
Yes.
with these people in general.
Yes.
We must be careful to recognize that even in the area of the political arena today, you'll recognize that there are individuals who have aligned themselves with certain individuals who they know really mean them no good.
That's right.
And yet, because one person may have something on another person, or their coffers may be filled, and therefore they take sides with that particular individual. So when we take a look at verse 9, the word says, when Joab saw that the battle was set against him both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in charge of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. So we recognize that even though these individuals, Syrians, Ammonites, will somehow find their way into the same camp together, Joab, the commander of the army of Israel, has recognized their improprieties and says, this is the way we will do battle against them. And so even in our own personal lives, we must recognize that God has given us the wherewithal and wisdom to battle against our enemy.
Amen.
Our ultimate enemy is the devil and his minions.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And we must never miss that point. Verse 12 says, be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what seems good to him. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and into the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. So when we have a strategic plan to go up against our enemy, you'll recognize that the enemy sees the strength of the unity and will have to flee. Whenever we as a people can unite, we can be strong enough to do battle against our adversaries. And like the Syrians, like the Ammonites, all of a sudden you'll find them fleeing from your presence.
Amen. I couldn't wait to talk to you about that. Okay, so these mighty men of valor, why are they running?
They're running because when the presence of God, even if you are outnumbered, God's power is greater than the numbers that are before you. And that's good news for us.
Amen. Yeah. I thought about that. I said, oh, yeah.
We may be a minority, but it does not weaken the potential because the God that we serve is greater than our enemy.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
In verse 15, the word says, but when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadaezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. They came to Helam with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadaezer, at their head. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadaezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. So the once combined army of the Syrians and the Ammonites have now been divided and conquered. And we must recognize that whenever there is division in the ranks, there is the potential to conquer the enemy. Yeah. So Israel recognizes that as long as they are united, as long as they can stay together, they can accomplish what needs to be accomplished. As a people, as a nation, this nation can be great when it is united, not divided. It cannot be us against them. It has to be our great nation against the enemies of our great nation.
Amen.
But as long as we have individuals who are attempting to divide our nation, we will find ourselves in this array.
That's right.
Yeah. Any thoughts over chapter 10 before we move to 11?
Okay.
So we'll move to chapter 11, and I hope that we just discovered that even here in chapter 10, God has given David the wherewithal to be victorious over his enemies, even when his enemies combine. Yeah. Now we move to chapter 11. And here is a staggering episode of David's life when David makes a decision that becomes so costly. Yeah. The word says, in the spring of the year, and now that's something that should be highlighted or underlined in your book, your Bible, so that somehow you recognize that this author has put this in here for a reason. It is in the spring of the year. It is at this time of the year when kings usually go off to war. The question becomes, why is spring so essential to going to do battle at this time? Some commentaries would suggest that this is a good time because, after all, this is the time when crop is growing. So when the individuals are out there and they're on the battlefield, the food is abundant. And they have the capability of sustaining their lives because they have sustenance to help them. It's also a good time because it's not in the winter when you have to do battle.
That's right.
So it's the springtime when kings are normally off to war.
Amen.
It says, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. And remember, we suggested whenever that holy conjunction is found in a biblical text, the word but, you really should underline it because whatever came before it is for a moment to be set aside so that you're focused on what's about to happen.
That's right.
We can't help but notice that just before the but, when David should have had his butt at war, when he should have been battling, he is resting at home. And that creates a problem for him. He never sends someone else to do a job that God has assigned to you.
Amen.
David is sitting at home and has sent Joab to do the job that he's been given by God himself to do. In verse 2, the word says, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was a bad sister, Smith's translation. Recognize that in this second verse, it's late in the day in more ways than one. In more ways than one. And the brother got up from the couch and was meandering around on the rooftop and glazed downward. And don't forget, anytime you see sin and it catches your attention, your gaze must be down. He's gazing down on the rooftop of this sister, which is ultimately going to cause him some problems. She is beautiful. She has grabbed his attention. In verse 3, the word says, and David sent and inquired about the woman. And if you don't mind, the word is literally suggesting that she so gripped him up.
That's right.
And got his attention that the brother said, look, go see who this babe is. Check her out. Come back and give me the information. Tell me her name. Give me the digits. Tell me who she is. Yeah. And sometimes a look can be too costly. Just a look can sometimes cost you more than it's worth. When he should have been off to war, this gaze cost him immensely. The word says, and one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah, the Hittite? Now he's got all the information he's needs. He's got the bio of his sister. He knows who her daddy is. He knows she's married. He knows her husband is under his command.
That's right.
And yet it does not stop his sexual desire. He sees her and desires her. Brothers, be careful of a gaze. A gaze implies that you look too long. If you look too long, it can cause something to well up in your heart that may cause you a great deal of trouble. Verse 4 said, so David sent messengers and took her. You hear that? And she came to him, and he lay with her. Now, please don't miss the point. She always had the privilege of saying no to this brother, whether it was because of his position of royalty or what, because she was attracted to him. We really don't know. We know this much, that the text informs us that he took her, and literally she came to him and he lay with her. Now the implication, whether you take this as a euphemism or as a reality, the sister gave in to the brother, and it can become costly.
I got to interject here.
Yes. Please do. Go right ahead.
Excuse me, because I think you really wanted me to chime in here.
Please do. Go right
because
ahead.
The scripture says that he took her.
Yes.
He sent for her and he took her. So what gives you the idea that she could have said no, knowing he was the king?
So your assumption is that because of his position, because of his position, she had no right to deny him.
Well, he was the king.
In the book of Leviticus, what happens to the sister and the brother who commits adultery? In Leviticus, technically, the sister is stoned to death as a result of adultery. So if anything, she had the opportunity to rebel against the king, because technically she should have been killed, because adultery, the penalty for adultery is death.
You're absolutely right, and I've read that, and I did research and look into that, and you're right. She is deserving of death because she was married. David knew she was married. David knew her husband was in his army. He was over him. David knew that he was out at battle. David sent for her. David took her. Yes, I do believe that he exerted authority over her. And as we read on, we'll understand a little bit longer, maybe you guys will understand my point, is that she knew that what she had just did, what occurred, was deserving of death. But David also took the actions that he took because he knew that his actions weren't.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no doubt. David was absolutely out of it. He had no right to do what he did. He was absolutely
standing up for us girls.
Yeah, but he was absolutely incorrect when he took the privilege of sending for her, bringing her in. At the same time, if she had decided to rebel against the king for bringing her in to do what he did, he would have been accused of rape.
Okay.
But because we have no biblical evidence to suggest that the sister literally tried to stop him, we can only conjecture that maybe it went this way. But you're absolutely wrong. The bottom line is that the king was out of character, had no right to do what he did. At the same time, she was married, and it should have stated somewhere that she denied uh, him or tried to deny him having sexual intercourse with her. Yeah. And again, I can't stress it enough. David was absolutely wrong in what he did. And God is very clear in reference to that with David. The word says, now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Obviously, it was that time of the month for her, according to the biblical text. So she is just coming off of this time, and yet David is still coming at her. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I'm pregnant. What an indictment about the situation that he has put her in. Because now, not only has he put himself upon her, there is a physical indictment that there's some improprieties that has transpired. And the evidence is staring both of them in the face. She is now pregnant. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. Look at the mindset of David. He's not really interested in how well Joab is doing and how the war is going. This is just conversation to kind of avert the attention away from what's really happening. And isn't that just like conniving folk? They will have a tendency to go left in order to keep you from looking right. And this is exactly what David is doing. One lie leads to another lie.
That's so true.
And a cover-up leads to another cover-up. And that's where David is right now. In verse 8, the word says, then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. Now, again, this is one of those euphemisms that's suggesting to Uriah, go down and clean yourself up so that you can spend some time with Bathsheba. And so, once again, this is just another way to cover up the dastardly deed that David has committed. So the word says, and Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. So again, Uriah is more, obviously, it appears for this moment, more realistic in relations to his warriors than David is about his command. For Uriah does not want to do a celebration when his guys are in battle.
That's right.
And the word says in verse 10, when they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house. David said to Uriah, have you not come from a journey? In other words, man, you've been out to battle all this time. Don't you think you should have gone in to check out Bathsheba to see how she's doing, to lay with her? And he said, why did you not go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths. And my lord Joab, the servants of my lord, are camping in the open field. He said, how in the world can I honestly go and lie in my bed with my wife in my plush home while everybody that I should be doing battle with is out there in the open field? Even the agreement of God, the Ark of the Covenant, is in a tent, and you telling me go into a house and relax and enjoy myself? So the word says, shall I then go to my house to eat and drink, to lie with my wife? As you live, and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Then David said to Uriah, remain here today also and tomorrow, and I'll send you back. So, and he's thinking again that if I leave him here long enough, maybe his sexual urges or his drive will cause him to go to Bathsheba. Not so. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David invited him, and he ate in his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to the house. Look at the extent that David will stoop. He assumes for a moment that if I get this joker drunk, surely his nature will rise and he will have a desire to go be with Bathsheba. One infraction leads to another.
Amen.
He has tried every trick in the book to get this man to go to be with his wife.
Amen.
What do you think, Sister?
I was thinking at this time, Uriah had more honor at this present time than David did.
Yeah.
Because David was persistent, and like you said, when you do one cover up, something else you have to cover up. That's like a lie after a lie after a lie. That's why your parents tell us that we just don't tell lies, because then you have to tell another lie. That's exactly what David was doing. He had, even after Uriah gave him the answer he gave him, listen, I can't go home. Right. You know, we're fighting. The Ark of God is in a tent. You know, we're in open field. I got to go back. My heart is there. You know, and David said, okay, fine, stay here. I'm going to get you drunk now. You know, and so he was plotting. He had no honor. At this point, Uriah had more honor than he did, and I was checking this out. That's why, as we continue to go forward, I kind of took on the shape of the idea that I perceived, that I said previously.
Or in reference to Bathsheba.
Right. Only because, as we continue on, and it may become clearer why I took that mindset. I can certainly see your point of view, but it just seemed to me that the way God dealt with David as we go on, we'll see that.
And I contend with you the fact that David was absolutely wrong. There is no doubt. And historians would suggest, literally, that Bathsheba had to obey the king. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And so I don't want to come off as being perceived as saying that this woman literally had a right to deny the king. I do want us to recognize that there are certain ways that we can look at the biblical text and know that there are some schools of thought that would say, okay, Bathsheba could have said no, or could she have? The bottom line is that David had the right to do what David did, and no authority to do that to this family. Because that's what he's done.
Exactly. And his family.
That's right. Which is going to show up. In verse 14, the word says, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die. And look to the levels that this dastardly deed can push David to. He has moved from trying to manipulate the situation in making Uriah the false daddy of his baby to the point that now he wants to see the demise of Uriah. And so we have to be careful in recognizing to what length sin will push us to.
That's right.
In verse 16, the word said, and as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew that there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. And he instructed the messenger, when you finish telling all the news about the fighting to the king, and then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? It's so amazing that David continues to slip from one level of ignorance and stupidity to the next level. In verse 21, the word says, who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field. But we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. David said to the messenger, thus shall you say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage it. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. I just wonder how much lamentation she really had. I shouldn't have thrown that in. Please forgive me, Tammy. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house. And she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord.
Amen.
Yeah. It is a sad day when you go to the levels, the cover of sin, as David had.
Amen.
It's a sad day. It's also an acknowledgement to all of us that when in fact you've done a dastardly deed, know this, that your sin will find you.
That's right.
It will find you.
Amen.
Any thoughts, Sister Tammy, as we go to chapter 12?
I am so glad to see that the light bulb has come on.
Oh, bless you.
You know what I thought? I just have to go back just briefly because I know we have to move forward. But the nerve of David to son Joab by the way of Uriah, and no.
Yeah, yes.
Oh my.
Yeah.
He says it by Uriah.
Yeah. Now think about how honorable Uriah must have been.
Yes, he didn't read it because I probably would have rather know.
That's right. If I'm going this distance, I know it had a seal on it, but still, it's like, what if he had read
the
this
bravenness of him?
Yeah.
And you know, and this is why I believe that yes, this was truly displeasurable in the sight of God because he was the king.
Yeah.
And when the Bible says that God, it says, but this thing David had done displeased the Lord. So I believe that God really held David accountable for this.
Yeah.
Because as we read on, we'll continue to see what happened, and not to take any accountability for Bathsheba, but
it's all on David.
It's all on David, and as far as her lamenting, the process during that time was 7 days. So she mourned for her husband for 7 days.
At least that's the biblical requirement. At least that's the requirement.
Before David sent for her again.
And think about this for a moment. In chapter 10, God has blessed David and has been victorious on these battles.
Yes.
When you get to chapter 11, there's a segment in his personal life that all of a sudden shows the flesh rearing up its ugly head in the life of David. He's still a great warrior.
Yes, he is.
But sometimes there are events in our personal lives where we recognize the devil is always busy trying to avert our attention.
Amen.
So then when we arrive at chapter 12, it's almost like that last verse of chapter 11 is strategically placed there because this event did not please God. And chapter 12 is the result of what happens when you displease God.
That's right.
The word says, and the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, there were 2 men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. And I just love when scenarios are presented in story form. Yeah. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity." It's almost as if this prophet, this first spokesperson for God, presents a parable to David. It actually is an indictment. Verse 7 says, Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more."
That's right.
Wow. Think David wasn't wealthy and had everything he desired. So then verse 9. "Why have you despised the word of the Lord, to do what is evil in his sight? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house." Wow.
Yes.
What an indictment.
Yes.
Evil against you out of your own house. "And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and you shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun." Wow. So if you thought it was a small thing to take the lamb of Uriah,
that's right.
Guess what? All these wives you got, the same thing that you did to Uriah, I'm going to do to you.
Yes.
But you did it secretly. But I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. David said to Nathan, "I've sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. And remember, whenever there is sin, the only penalty for sin is death." In this case, God loved David so that he said, "You will not die because of this right now." Yeah. "Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die." Then Nathan went to his house. Wow. I cannot imagine the mindset of David to hear the man of God declare upon not just David, but his family and his loved one. You want to get to a person, reach out to the children. You'll get their undivided attention. And God says, your child will be the cornerstone.
Yes.
Wow. So you may have produced a child through Bathsheba, but the child will not live long. Wow.
Yeah, that was
it reminds us so often that when we have sinned against God, there is an ultimate penalty that must be paid. And so often it is so costly that we can't bear it.
Wow.
In verse 15, then Nathan went to his house, and the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. You hear that? David is pleading to God on behalf of his baby because his baby is sick. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. And the elders of his house stood beside him. to raise him from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the seventh day, the child died, my Lord. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. But they said, behold, while the child was yet alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen to us. How then can we say to him, the child is dead? He may do himself some harm. But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David understood that the child was dead. And David said to his servant, is the child dead? They said, he is dead. Then David arose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes. And he went into the house of the Lord and worshiped. He then went to his own house. And when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servant said to him, what is this thing that you've done? You fast and wept for the child while he was alive. But when the child died, you arose and ate food. He said, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live. But now he's dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. Wow. How heartbroken David must have been. And how devastating this must have been to David to recognize that as a result of his improprieties in life, someone had to lose their life. An innocent child had to lose their life because of the deeds of David. Any thoughts, sis?
Oh man, so much thoughts.
Yeah.
And I really think that God was so disappointed in David.
Yeah.
But what I do have to say is, when I was explaining at the time, Uriah had more honor than David did. Yeah. David's honor has come back to him. And I say that because the moment Nathan explained to him in the story in the parable like man what had happened, David immediately repented. And he did not make excuses. Right. He did not try to, cover up for what he done. He knew what he had done was wrong. Yeah. And one thing I loved about this, Nathan told David, you should, what you did is worthy of death, but God is not going to kill you. Right. But that doesn't say there was no, God didn't punish him for this. Yeah. Because as we'll learn as we go on, his household, he brought a lot of condemnation upon his household, his children, upon this newborn baby here. So God was very displeased with David. Right. And there are consequences for our sin. And we think today, as Christians, God forgives us of our sins. And yes, he does. Yeah. He does. He's forgiven. But there are consequences for the sins that we commit today. Yeah. And as Christians, we don't like to think about it in those terms. Yeah. God forgives us. I'm forgiven. But there's consequences.
There's a cost.
For the things that we do. Yeah. That's not right in God's sight.
And we must not miss the fact that as a result, at this point, David's family becomes what we call dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. It is dysfunctional as a result of his improprieties. Yes. Many of our families are dysfunctional because of some of the things that have transpired with the parents. Mm-hmm. You may not die as a result immediately of your transactions, but there can be death in the relationship.
That's right. Right.
This is a great cost to David and Bathsheba because they lose the child. Never forget, to the Hebrew, for the female, the first child she is to have is a male child.
That's right.
Because it's only then that the father can go sleep with the fathers when they die. After the male child is born, she loses the first child.
Wow.
It is no light infraction because of what they've done. And now we move to the next pericope of scripture, which shows the next child in line.
Amen.
Verse 24 says, Then David comforted his wife, Bathsheba, and went in to her and lay with her, and she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him and sent a message by Nathan the prophet. So he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. So the next child that David is to have by Bathsheba is Solomon, the famous son of David.
That's right.
You have to ask yourself the question, what would that baby have been like that lived, that was produced out of adultery? We will never know. We will never know.
Wow.
In verse 26, the word says, Now Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and took the royal city. And Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Rabbah. Moreover, I've taken the city of waters. Now then gather the rest of the people together and encamp against the city and take it, lest I take the city and it be called by my name. So David gathered all the people together and went to Rabbah and fought against it and took it. And he took the crown of the king from his head. The weight of it was a talent of gold, and in it was a precious stone, and it was placed on David's head. And he brought out the spoil of the city, a very great amount. And he brought out the people who were in it and sent them to labor with saws and iron picks and iron axes, and made them toil at the brick kilns. And thus he did to all the cities of the Ammonites. Then David and all the people returned to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It is apparent that only after God begins to forgive David and to bless David's life is David victorious over his enemies again. 10, 11, and 12, the chapters we've just discussed, help us to recognize that there is always a penalty to be paid for our sins.
That's right.
We must recognize that God is not pleased with the infractions that we have in our personal life. Imagine where David would be or would have been if in fact he remained faithful and focused.
That's right.
I would admonish all of us today to remain faithful and focused in our personal lives as we seek to do God's will. Any thoughts, Minister White?
I thought that was such a great, we oftentimes hear that story about David and Bathsheba, but I think I got a deeper understanding. It wasn't just the story. It came off the pages of understanding just how David had took everything God had given him and put it at risk. And God had to punish David for it. And there was consequences that he paid, his family paid for what he had done, because God said, I had given you everything. If you had wanted more, I would have given you more. And so it was just a good study, and I'm so grateful. I was almost like, I can't wait to get to this what Pastor got to say, and so I'm so glad, that we took the time to explore.
Just like to remind all of you, whatever you do, and again, we thank you for being here. Minister White, bless you. Thank you for your words of encouragement and insightful thoughts in the biblical text. Just as a reminder, whatever you do, make sure that if there's some dysfunctionality in your family, go back, take a look at your own life, and see what some things in your life that have transpired that has caused it to be the way it is. Be blessed. Be encouraged on this day. That's our prayer.
Amen.